It was the best of times. It was the weirdest of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the semester of doom. It was the semester of Zoom. It was the epoch where we learned what was important and also what was not. It was the spring of despair, moving into the summer of possibly somewhat less despair, giving way to hope. Anyway, we're here. I'm John Fleming, Director of Creative Writing at the University of South Florida, and I want to welcome you to the virtual curtain call of 2020. While the virus may have dimmed the lights of Cooper Hall, it has not dimmed our affection for the 8 MFA graduates of the class of 2020, nor has it dimmed their amazing talents. Normally, we would be gathering on the 7th floor of the Interdisciplinary Sciences building with a view of the campus through the expansive windows, the puffs of clouds, the tops of palm trees and oaks, a flock of white ibises passing by, and the promise of a lush, calm, productive summer after the tumultuous final weeks of studying and grading. We held out hope for as long as we could that we could be together as a community to celebrate these excellent people and writers, to meet their families and shake their hands, and send them off into the literary world to slay dragons and lift torches and generally shake things up in a world that needs shaking. For our part, we'll have to settle for a video send-off and a take it from here. 3 years ago, these students arrived in the MFA program with an impressive stash of natural talent and a desire to learn. They bonded with each other. They showed their good natures. They worked hard and wrote hard. They balanced classes, teaching schedules, writing lives, and personal lives, and somehow made it work. I was going to say they made it look easy, but even though they kept their good humor, no one was really fooled. This was hard work. And now I'm happy to say they've come out the other side, better writers, even harder workers, people who have pushed through some adversities never imagined. They're the kind of people who get things done and make things happen. They're the kind of people we need more of. They're good. And they're here today to give you a sample of just how good they are. Please enjoy these readings, as I know you'll be enjoying their work for years to come. And please join me in congratulating the USF MFA class of 2020. We wish you the very best.
When I first met with Ashleigh to discuss her thesis project last fall, she brought me 2 succulent plants as a welcome to USF. I've managed to keep them alive this past year. Ashleigh's thoughtful gift not only shows her kindness and generosity, but it also shows something at the center of her work, a care for the natural world. In her thesis titled A World Not Quite Fatal, a collection of essays, Ashleigh weaves the personal with research to explore larger societal questions about environmental conservation, climate change, gender, sexuality, class, family, and home. From the reconstruction of the Spinosaurus to the origin of love bugs to the white nose syndrome in bats, these essays will surprise you and teach you things about the natural world you won't be able to forget. In these essays, Ashleigh experiments with form, including a FEMA tornado preparation guide, an interview questionnaire with Rachel Carson, and the Torino Impact Hazard Scale. While at USF, Ashleigh served as an assistant in the Digital Collections Office, a mentor in the first-year composition program, and a program assistant in the MFA and Creative Writing program. In addition to her teaching and leadership positions at USF, Ashleigh has worked in both the nonprofit and government sector, teaching regional ecology, including internships at the Hiawatha National Forest in Michigan's Upper Peninsula and Haleakala National Park in Hawaii. I wish we were all together celebrating in person, but to all of you graduating this year, know that I'm celebrating you and all of your accomplishments. Congratulations, Ashleigh, on the successful defense of your thesis and on graduation.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to Curtain Call, wherever the Curtain Call may be. I decided to do something a little differently and take you out to one of my favorite natural spaces here in the Tampa Bay area, which is the Lower Green Swamp Preserve. Really beautiful area. You know, I think when we think of Florida, we forget there's lots of grasslands here, so I took you. Hopefully this will be a nice nature break for some of you that are stuck inside. Enjoy a little bit of the bird sounds out here. Just a little bit more informally, but you know, it's pandemic. I didn't get to do my curtain call with all the fanfare and setup, so hell, I'll come out here in the woods, woods, the grassland, whatever, and just kind of read to you and hopefully you enjoy this space. So I do have a little bit of an introduction. I just like to read, so apologies if anything takes a second. It's got to load out here and the signal's not so good. So first off, I would like to thank my thesis committee, which includes Ira and Jared. I especially like to thank my thesis director, Julia, who graciously stepped in. She came basically my last year. Didn't really, when I needed a thesis director, didn't know me too well, but she committed such time and care to my writing. Really, we were practically strangers, yet she supported me as if we'd been colleagues for years, so I'm very thankful for that. And also the wonderful words. I hope she says wonderful words about me. We're recording all of our pieces separately, so if she said I was stinky, just ignore this part. But I'm going to assume she did not say that. I also want to thank my wonderful family and friends, wherever you happen to be right now. They have all supported me so much for this journey. Really, if I were to go over every kindness you've given me, I'd be here for hours, and the park closes at sunset, which is like in like an hour and a half. So, just hope you'll take this humble thanks. If not, well, I don't have money to give you really, but I'll take a picture of a bird for you. There's a lot of birds. There's birds sitting back there, so I'll take a picture. And if you want a little bit more material rewards, that could be your material reward. So, so just gonna briefly talk about my thesis, very briefly, because to be honest, I just want to sit in nature and read some stuff to you. My thesis, really in brief, was a collection of nonfiction essays of exploring the connections to natural world, both on an individual, a personal level, and on a community level. And as such, this is really important for me to kind of say, I feel an obligation to acknowledge the indigenous peoples who were the original caretakers of the land in which I wrote many of these pieces or was inspired by to make these pieces that are in my thesis. This includes, but certainly is not limited to, the Ojibwa and Potawatomi of Michigan. And just forewarning, I'm going to do my best, but if there's any mispronunciations, please excuse me. Some of these names I haven't necessarily had the privilege of hearing out loud. The native people of Hawaii, the Seminole tribe of Florida, and the Wasanic, Lukunguin, and Esquimalt peoples of the Coast Salish Nation. Again, apologies if I mispronounced anything. This statement for me serves as acknowledgement of how I and others have benefited from the colonization of the lands that I've been on. So, and it's something I think also relates to my writing. I've just been kind of scratching at while writing. I found myself exploring how systems of oppression not only has harmed, us, but the people, not only harmed, the environment, but the people on land, us, really looking at environmental violence. So, just what kind of my time I have here now, I've really only begun reflecting and scratching at these thoughts myself, so I'm not going to go into depth what I've been kind of exploring, because I don't feel like I'm any sort of expert, and I'm still kind of, like I said, exploring all these thoughts and feelings, but I feel obligation, especially kind of in these tumultuous times, to encourage you all, in the small space I have, to think about the, such issues about environmental violence and, the oppressions of different people. The pandemic really has exacerbated a lot of pre-existing violences towards marginalized communities, and I hope all of those have benefited from privileges. We may not be all gathered together, but to go to graduate school or to send your children to graduate school, for many of us, is a thing that a lot of people can't do. So I think a lot of us here have some sort of privileges. Again, privileges are not necessarily, everything was handed to you. It just means that there's some things in life that'll come easier to us because we live in a society. So with those privileges, I really hope you will look and see how you can work to protect the lives and dignity of people of color, of people that are part of the LGBTQ plus community. Disabled communities are definitely being especially affected right now, but I think just even after we've kind of moved past this pandemic. And also kind of going back to our land acknowledgement statement, looking how we can support the sovereignty movements of indigenous communities. Again, if, I'm reading some environmental stuff, if you care about the environment, if you care about people, these are things you're going to want to do. They're all interconnected. There's no separation. So, with that said, thank you for listening to my introduction. I'd like to read a little bit. While my thesis was in nonfiction, I consider myself a bit of a hybrid writer. So I'm going to read 3 shorts, and they're going to be from the 3 main genres we have here, which is fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. So first I'm going to read a small flash from my, like I said, I'm loading this up, so thank you for your patience. That was for my thesis, and this was about speaking in tumultuous times. In the first couple weeks of moving here, I experienced my first hurricane, and it was Hurricane Irma, which was at one point a Category 5 hurricane. Luckily it was not when it hit here, but it was still kind of like a very, like I said, the word of the day, tumultuous. And it was really just a weird time. So I've been writing, I think, a lot about Hurricane Irma. But here's a small nonfiction, or small, like, kind of flash memoir piece. And this was published in The Pinch, and I'm going to upload kind of notes, and I'm going to link to it. So see if you want to go back and read it, or if you need kind of reading notes to help you along with it, they'll be there. So this is called Antediluvian. Hurricane Irma will make landfall tomorrow, and I don't know what else to do but go to the beach. The park I go to is not the iconic sugar sand beach of tourism ads, but it's the closest to my apartment, and I don't feel like sitting in a pretty spot anyway. The park lies not on the Gulf, but Tampa Bay, shielded from the full force of the ocean, a resting place for vegetation, concrete, and the smell of gentle decay that permeates so much of the state. I wade in. I've always had compulsion to submerge myself, even when the ocean does nothing to welcome me. The water is the color and temperature of microwave chicken broth. I lay back, the softness of my body holding me on the surface of the water. The waves are slowly building, stirred up by the first gust of the looming storm. I've never seen it so windy here before. On the other side of the bay, the windows of the buildings sparkle with late day sunlight. The city's full of naked glass, the hardware shop's lawn emptied of plywood. Another arrogance, another poor planning, just like the condos and stores crowd around the water's edge. The buildings tingle, ocean-starved, as if they were wild-grown mangroves and not things of metal and wire. Nobody here seems to think of melting glaciers or the way this land crawls and sinks back into its ancient truth. I wonder what will be left by tomorrow's end and what happens when a creeping deluge meets the rabid foam of a hurricane. Above my head, planes hiss and roar their departure, full of people heading somewhere safe. I watch them leave, the sea pulsing in my ears, and try to imagine what it feels like to flee. So the next piece I'm going to read, I feel like it's a mood we can all kind of resonate now with, like, except there's nowhere to flee. It's everywhere. So the next piece I'm going to read is actually a poem. Again, I'm kind of honoring my hybrid nature. Is this a short poem? This was originally published in Anomaly. And I wrote this in response to a man called Jordan Peterson. Some of you may be aware of his work. And for you that are not familiar, God, I wish it was you first. But he is kind of a prominent, I guess, philosopher, psychologist. I'm not really sure what exactly it's called. He's published a lot of kind of self-helpy books, but they're kind of rooted in this misogynistic, homophobic overtones, really. And I wouldn't say he's kind of in that really conservative alt-right, but I definitely think he gets you to there in some steps. And as a queer woman, I found myself kind of battling with a lot of what he's saying, and he had a huge influence, so it kind of inspired in my little space to kind of write against that. And this is a poem. A lot of my poems kind of deal with, I love paleontology, so kind of taking those ancient images and words and comparing them to kind of current issues. So this poem is kind of dealing with that, and it's called "The Ark Will Not Save the Eurypterid." You push your finger into the sand, say, "Here is where we will clean the ocean, drain all the salt water from the world, use its orphan film to write our God-given names. We are like lobsters. It is It is right to eat our women. It is time to live on the land, and we will tell you, you can't preach the mud off our backs. You turn our truth ugly with beauty and orders. can't sing down our walls of mucus, and you were right, we are arthropods, but not lobsters to be buttered and boiled. We are sea scorpions, making footprints in boulders, making a salvation of carapace, making a god of ourselves, making the first thing benthic, and it was good. So just one last short piece I'd like to read. It's bugs in my nose. That's nature, baby. I want to read a short fiction piece, a short flash piece. That's how I thought it would be nice to kind of send off a fiction piece, even if I was a nonfiction writer. Leaving this program, fiction was the thing I first started. I really love fantasy, so I think this is a way to kind of honor the history that I come from and where I kind of learned to love writing. So this piece was originally published in Cotton Seed North. If I may be allowed to brag a little bit, it was actually selected for Best Microfiction of 2020. So if you're ever interested in that publication, I don't get money for it, but it has a cool collection of stuff. It's a book. You can buy it. I don't know. Like I said, I don't get money from it, so. But yeah, I think it's really cool, and it's short, and I like to do a little send-off, and, I'm a queer woman, so of course I love space stuff. So here's the thing about space. Here are the things the moon told me during the lunar eclipse of January 21st, 2019. She appreciates you all standing in the cold to see her. She doesn't mind if you couldn't make it. She doesn't really understand what being cold means, so she'll take your word for it. She's heard a few of you are afraid of staring into the night sky, and the forced contemplation of eternity and vastness that comes with it. She thinks, perhaps, that you should put yourself in her place, constantly staring at the sweep of the earth, and that it will help you come to peace with your own smallness. She says to be careful sharing telescopes and binoculars, you'll get pink eye or MRSA. She is admittedly unversed in diseases, but knows humanity has a fondness for dripping all over everything. She knows that her light fills you with melancholy and thoughts of those that have passed away. She says to eat that extra slice of pizza. She would be happy to be your big gay wife. She likes all your poems because it's the thought that counts. She wants to know if we still have mammoths, or did we get rid of them? She thought mammoths were pretty cool. She wonders why you haven't turned your scars into the shape of rabbits and toads like she's done with her bruises. She assures you the moon landing is not fake. She wants you to know she tries her best to catch all the stones that might kill you. She has never been fond of meteors and their errant catastrophes, a compensation for their aeons of lonesome orbits. She would like you to stop saying every lunar eclipse is the end of the world. This is not the end of anything, but a lucky moment where she and the sun and the earth and you fit into each other's shadow. Thank you again for spending this time with me. Stay safe and keep up the good fight. Solidarity always. And I'll see you on the other side of this. Bye.
Once upon a time there was an egg, small, smooth, and perfectly shaped. Inside this oval object lived an embryo. It took about 21 days for the egg to hatch. The simple story of the egg is the story of flash fiction, also small, smooth, and perfectly shaped, also containing the embryo of a larger tale, also taking about 3 weeks to hatch. Over the past 3 years, USF MFA graduate Courtney Clute has been writing flash fiction. Her marvelous collection of microstories is aptly entitled Eggs. Eggs is one of the most accomplished thesis manuscripts I've had the pleasure of reading. In her thesis introduction, Courtney explains her attraction to flash. I was enamored with the short form, she says, with its difficulty, its limitations and constraints, with a sweet feeling that comes when you are finally able to fit your words into these constraints successfully. From her coming-of-age stories, to her explorations of mother-daughter relationships, to the fantastic worlds in which skin moles talk and ghosts float down the street, Courtney reduces each story until what remains seems so essential. After that, our imagination takes over. Do you want to know why a girl gets obsessed with eating popcorn? A young woman steals other people's hair, and another falls in love with a garbage truck? You'll find out all this and more in Courtney Clute's wonderful collection, Eggs.
Hello, and thank you for joining the virtual curtain call. This is certainly not how I expected the class of 2020 curtain call to go, but nevertheless, I am grateful that I still get to celebrate with my cohort despite the challenges we face. In this video, I will be reading 2 short flash fiction pieces, but before I do, I would like to take a moment to offer my thanks to everyone who's helped shape my journey in this MFA program. I am so grateful for the faculty I've had the pleasure of working with over the past three years. I've learned so much as a writer, and I will forever remember your wisdom as I continue writing. I would especially like to thank my thesis committee, my readers, John Fleming and Karen Brown, for contributing valuable insight into my flash fiction collection, and my thesis director, Rita Cerisi, the queen of flash fiction, for teaching me all I know about flash. I will never forget to squeeze out the prose of any extraneous words. To my wonderful, beautiful, talented cohort, I could write a whole memoir about the incredible memories we've had together. Please know that I love each and every one of you, and I'm so grateful to share these 3 years together. You are all amazing, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for each of you. To my friends, the table, the squad, you know who you are. Thank you for your encouragement and support while I completed my program. I love you all. To Justin, thank you for your immense support of my writing, for reading my thesis and offering valuable feedback, for keeping me sane when grad school got to be too much sometimes, and for making me a better person. I love you very much. To my siblings, my sister and brother for keeping it lighthearted. And finally, I want to thank my mom and dad. When almost 8 years ago, I told them I wanted to pursue a creative writing degree, and when almost 4 years ago, I told them I wanted to pursue an MFA, they've only shown support, care, and love. I love you all. Now, my first piece I want to read is very short. It's called Ben's Greatest Accomplishments. And it's a list, by the way, like a bulleted list. So that's the only thing you need to know about this. Being voted most likely to succeed in his high school senior year class superlatives, joining a fraternity, getting elected as secretary for the Future Business Leaders of America Club in college, winning Beer King at his last fraternity beer fest, graduating with straight B's, getting waitlisted to an MBA program, eating 100 medium-sauced wings at Hooters and not throwing up, winning $500 on a scratch-off, spending that $500 on glow-in-the-dark tire rims, watching every Fast and the Furious movie to date in one sitting, starting as assistant manager at Olive's Premium Olive Oil at the Outlet Mall, going 3 months without paying rent before his landlord noticed, attending jury duty still drunk from the night before and getting picked to be on a case for a house burglary, accidentally spilling hot coffee on John Cena in a Starbucks, which ended in a selfie, discovering a Cheez-It chipped in a way that looks like Phineas's head from Phineas and Ferb, getting promoted to manager at Olive's Premium Olive Oil, catching 3 t-shirts from the t-shirt cannon at the Orlando Magic game last year, buying a t-shirt cannon, finally scoring a date on Match.com with a nice girl, applying for an MBA program 5 years after the first time and getting in, didn't end up going. He missed the deposit deadline that secured his spots. Asking Match.com girl to marry him 3 months after their first date. Match.com girl saying no to his proposal. Blessing in disguise, probably would have ended badly. And finally, going to his 10-year high school reunion, showing everyone that he most likely succeeded. Okay, and my last piece that I'm reading, my last flash fiction piece, is called When Wings Explode. Sebastian trapped the butterfly's wings between his fingers, still sticky from the tub of cotton candy he just ate. Sebastian felt the butterfly trying to flutter its wings, but that only made him pinch harder. He thought he could show the butterfly around to the other kids in the playground. They didn't talk to him much. He held the butterfly up high like the trophy he didn't win for the hula hoop contest at field day yesterday and marched over to Tiffany, who was lazily swaying on a swing. Sebastian pushed the insect close to Tiffany's face. She didn't laugh at him like the rest of the class. Sometimes he would cut in front of her at the water fountain and she wouldn't say anything. She stopped swinging. He liked her. "Look at my pretty butterfly," he said. "So what?" Tiffany pumped her legs back, then forward, and soared out of the swing. She ran away, heading towards the group that played tag by the basketball court, the group that told Sebastian moments before that he wasn't allowed to play. When he asked to join, they had laughed and said he wasn't ever fast enough to catch anyone. The butterfly squirmed in between his fingers, its black legs manic like it was trying to find solid ground. Sebastian's hand trembled as he searched the playground for someone else. Someone out there had to find the school. He marched over to the slide, waiting, letting luck offer him his next friend. Seconds later, Timothy tumbled down, his shirt coming up past his belly button, the skin rubbing against the plastic, sparking streaks of squeals. Timothy landed on the sand, spraying it everywhere. It shot into Sebastian's eyes, almost causing him to lose his grip on the butterfly. "I could have killed you," Timothy said as he stood and picked sand from in between his belly rolls. "Look, it's a pretty butterfly," Sebastian said, rubbing his eyes with his free hand. Timothy stepped closer and peered at the insect. Sebastian could see the grains of sand stuck to the sweat on Timothy's hairline. His eyes narrowed in, and Sebastian was sure Timothy was about to high-five him. But he said, "That's a moth, dummy." Sebastian joined Timothy's inspection. The wings were a blanket of gray speckled with white spots of black streaks. Just because the wings didn't have the typical bright colors didn't make it a moth, Sebastian thought. Sebastian shook his head. "Nope, it's a butterfly." Timothy shrugged and ran back up the stairs to go down the slide again. Finally, Sebastian took his butterfly to Angelica, who sat under the monkey bars, drawing pictures in the sand with a stick. She was usually alone like Sebastian. He didn't play with her much because she was so shy. She never said anything when Sebastian tried to talk to her. "Look at my butterfly," he said to her. "It isn't a moth." Angelica stood, the sand stuck to the spot on her knees where she was sitting. She put her eyes so close to it, Sebastian thought he saw her eyelashes brush its wings. She took in a breath. "It's beautiful." She put her hands on top of Sebastian's fingers so that their hands became one. He felt a pulse in between their hands, and his heart beat fast, like the butterfly's wings when he first spotted it. Together, they pinched the butterfly's wings. It shook under the weight of their pressure, trying hard to flap its wings and fly. They pushed harder. The butterfly resisted. Together, they felt the butterfly explode. They took their fingers away. Angelica held one wing, Sebastian held the other. And that's everything. Thank you for listening in.
I'm going to begin with a quotation from Stephanie's thesis. Quote, "My life is divided and marked by borders," end quote. In her thesis titled Mind the Gap, an essay collection, Stephanie explores familial geographies, the borders that define relationships, the absences and silences we inherit, and the distance it takes to know the people closest to us. Born to a Canadian and an American, Stephanie writes about the border lines that marked her childhood, adolescence, and early adulthood. From a blue folder that contains her citizenship documents to a childhood interview with an agent at a border stop, Stephanie examines how custody is also a kind of border making. From the parahi she makes with her grandmother to the ice skates she laces up beside her mother, a triple gold medalist in figure skating, freestyle, and ice dance, to the childhood nickname Huzha, the Ukrainian word for gosling, that she inherits from her own mother, to her mother and her grandmother's breast cancer diagnoses. This collection looks at the powerful bonds that link the women in her family. In addition to her teaching experience at USF, Stephanie has worked for several years as an academic copy editor and an academic research mentor. Her essays have been published in Blank Spaces and Sawpalm. Congratulations, Stephanie, on the successful defense of your thesis and on graduation.
It was an exceptionally foggy day, one not fit for sailing, and yet here we were, Drew and I, out on a boat, my first time. Drew said I should learn by doing, and so I pulled ropes and threw switches and turned wheels, all the normal things one does while sailing. I looked to Drew's face from time to time for recognition that I was doing something right or wrong, but he was stoic. The fog made it hard to see, and after about an hour, it was clear I had stranded us in the middle of Lake Sterling, an unmapped body of water in central Florida. I wanted to turn back, but Drew refused. At some point, and for a reason I didn't understand at the time, he finally stood up from the comfort of his canvas folding chair, set his cup of dry cereal down on the table next to him, reached down to the floor, and pulled out a large plug. Water filled the boat. Drew said, "We're almost there." I didn't know what he meant. I just knew we were sinking. For a moment, I thought maybe this was part of sailing. Water overcame us, and the next thing I remember, we had washed up on the shore of an uncharted island in the middle of the lake. Drew's writing is wild and unmapped. As a writer, Drew is interested in the questions that ask questions, in instigating a search, in creating the condition for new possibilities. In his essays, he looks to the past not for clarity or answers, but to construct the trajectory that got him to where he is today. What missteps, what accidents, what surprises brought him here? Drew's writing is an act of building the past and serves as a reminder that we are the stories we tell about ourselves. The ones that already happened, yes, but the ones that come next as well. It's a kind of faith that something will be there because we kept going. Through his vivid renderings and thoughtful analyses, Drew brings us to the moments in his life that serve as waypoints, beacons, or to use one of Drew's own metaphors, fire towers, that let us see farther and clearer than we should. The real gift of Drew's writing isn't in uncovering, revealing, or reconstructing the past. It's the way his act of remembering casts forth a hope for what the future might look like, as long as we keep going. I'm glad I went on that sailing expedition. I'm glad Drew didn't turn back when all signs suggested that we should. I just didn't know what Drew knew, that of course there would be land. Not because there had to be, but because we would make it so. Drew's writing, like his sailing, sets out without knowing where it's going, with a list of questions, wonderings, and curiosities, fueled by the belief that we will not drown. There is no death, only a new shore to wash up on. And, like we did years ago, we will stand, brush the sand from our clothes, wipe the water from our eyes, and tell the story once we're ready. Please welcome Drew Miles.
Jared, thank you so much for that incredible introduction. It really hit home for me. I had a lot of the points that my writing was trying to get at, and it definitely got to my heart. So I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being my thesis director, guiding me throughout these past couple years, watching my thesis grow, believing in it, facilitating my writing and my workshopping and my revision. It's been a true honor and pleasure, so thank you. Thank you also to my MFA thesis committee, Julia and Ira, for bringing me to the program, for asking me questions that have led me further, for helping me along the journey, and encouraging me to discover. I'm truly grateful. Thank you also to the MFA, as well as the English department, for their continued support and love, as well as my family and my friends for getting me to this moment. I wouldn't be here without you all. So I'd like to read two poems for you. I'm a nonfiction writer primarily, but these are two poems I think have come a long way. They still have some work to do, I think, but I'm really liking the direction they're taking, as well as some of the concepts in them are hitting home for me. So I want to share those with you all for our video. All right, here goes. Bluebird, in the thicket, in the thick of it. In color stream, eggs like chocolate, morning rocket, chestnut socket, blessed pulpit, wakes me to skinny sunshine. Bluebird in the meadow, head down, turn to volume. All eyes on you, beady-eyed helmet. Swelling it, rust breastnet, and beak spit. A song on the snowflake. Bluebird on the field edge, wing ledge, stone hedge, backbone, fledgling, berry swelling, blue fairy, in open country dwelling, on wintry tree, my blue-eyed brother spots you first. Bluebird in the orchard, shards and gilt shard, scars healed by fruit juices, silver spruces, pine builder's nest, trail healers. Your calls call me home, over tree lines. Bluebird at the birdhouse, at the window, billow feather disco, heart hero, heart dear, near glass, surpass, chirp greeting, dawn meeting. So that poem was inspired by my brother spotting a bluebird in the middle of winter. It was very strange. Not sure why that bluebird was hanging around, but my brother spotted it, and it inspired that poem. I also was really struggling to write that poem, and finally at the end of the semester in Dr. Souther's class, I was taking a break listening to some Notorious B.I.G. and some of the techniques he uses in Hypnotize actually led me to rethink how I wanted to design that poem. So a lot of that sort of leading into the next rhyme per se is inspired by Biggie. So the next poem I'd like to read is called Homecoming. This one is a mix of a lot of concepts, so not really a particular subject matter, but sort of like coming home after being a different person. That's kind of how I wanted to connect it to others, but it does have a special, meaning to me in terms of, coming out and discovering myself and connecting with my family after doing so. Homecoming. Distant choirs behind beech trees, like aged light from bashful stars. Sign of amber lamp cloud echo, pouring cold paint on black silk lake. I screech to freeze, unveiling stifled skin before informed kin who note he walks a little taller. The reunion shivers down rib skin, slides over bone song, plucks nerves, so forever ends at a door knock. My slush wounds, impact on viscid snow, remind me of how my footprints have changed. Though I wear the same limp leather boots, then muffled doorbell past glass presents me outside. These new souls of threshold amongst snow roar, amongst semi-drone. Now grandfather clock ambles near, changed hour, to find peace pain like sonar, like a doorbell chamber. A lighting candle ghost, warmth coming out, side to them, finally in weary boots, while chills whistle through shrunken, woven glove fingers, boil dreaming of TV static naps, loved. Again after folding, imploding, when clock hands know no blues breach clouds, when beauty is wrapped, protected, not extinguished. I am shattered, moment, cracked, ornament, but I return out with all inside themselves, so I may press down the sustaining pedal. Thank you.
A keepsake is a remembrance, a way to hold on to someone or something. When I was a child, Cheryl writes, my grandmother would stop all the clocks in the house from ticking so I could sleep. We called it the unwinding. It is from this act of love, this stopping of time, from which Cheryl takes the name for her thesis, The Unwinding, a hybrid collection of poetry and essays. In this collection, Cheryl explores how the act of keeping artifacts allows us to alter time, to understand our families and ourselves in new ways. If we can think of keepsake as a verb, how is keepsaking a refusal to leave, a refusal to abandon, a refusal to renounce? From a series of postcard poems to a photo essay on the art of preservation, to a poem and an essay about the death of a man she loves, to an essay on a friend's dialysis treatments, the essays and poems in this collection explore what it means to hold on to our grief, to acknowledge our loss as something that is as real as an object we can hold in our hands. The poems and essays in The Unwinding investigate similar themes and events, and yet, working in both forms allows Cheryl to more fully explore the nuances of loss. At USF, Cheryl coordinated the 2019 Blank Pages Symposium and the 2019 Curtain Call. Last fall, she taught poetry workshops at the Zephyr Hills Correction Facility. Before the MFA, Cheryl worked for almost 20 years in accounting. She earned her BA from St. Leo University, and she's had work published in Sandhill Review, Crosswinds Poetry Journal, and Poetry South. Congratulations, Cheryl, on the successful defense of your thesis and on graduation.
Hi everyone, I'm Cheryl. Thank you, Julia, for your kind introduction, and thanks to all of you who are taking the time to view our reading. It's been a weird experience to finish 3 years of graduate school and not have any celebrations or be able to walk across the stage, but I'm glad we can all appear here in a video. Thank you, Courtney, for putting this together. I'm graduating with a great bunch of people who have taught me so much. We've made wonderful memories, laughed and cried together, and I can genuinely say I've made some lifelong friends who I cherish beyond words. I also want to thank all of my creating writing professors at USF, with special gratitude to my thesis director, Julia Coutts. I'm going to read 4 poems from my thesis, which is titled The Unwinding. It's a hybrid work of prose, poetry, and image, and one of the main themes in my thesis is loss and grief, which is reflected in these poems. Fabric King. My mother shopped at Fabric King, a cold, dark, wood-paneled store no bigger than my bedroom. She had long established the look but don't touch rule while shopping, but here, tall glass bins brimming open with loose buttons, practical black, blue, and tan ones waiting for pants and shirts, wooden ones for heavy wool coats, iridescent abalone to adorn silks were an allowable exception. Have you ever plunged your arm shoulder deep into the sea in search of a shell? Felt water's weightless pressure, how it loosens you from your skin, how it clings to you, shimmering like buttons, like grief. Accidental. This is what I know. 7 days passed before I called the police for a wellness check. Joe was found in his bed. This is what I know. Many factors play a role in decomposition. It was January in Florida. For 3 days straight, the high reached 78. The house was closed, no running heat or air. He kept a clean house. He kept a clean body. This is what I know. There are names for the life surrounding death. Necrophages feed on a corpse. Necrophiles feed on necrophages. Opportunists use a corpse as a source of refuge or heat. Accidentals are in the presence of a corpse due to chance. This is what I know. The dog survived. When I shared my story in a writing workshop, a young man wondered, out loud, if the dog fed from the body. This is what I know. The inside of my lip bled for 2 days. This is what I know. The dog is so picky, he won't even eat a carrot. The dog was an accidental. This is what I know. A body bloats, discolors, blisters. A fever prior to death can accelerate the invasion of intestinal bacteria into a body. Flesh flies invade, laying larvae or maggots, even in enclosed spaces. This is what I know. His skin was the cool side of the pillow. This next poem is patterned after Ruth Mediavensky's You Look Up Pictures of Icelandic Ponies. I eat peanut butter and dill pickle sandwiches for breakfast and cry over dead animals I pass on the road. I am a dandelion gone to seed and blown. I am the night blooming jasmine outside my childhood home. And when cruel words curl my tongue, I spit them at others and I force them to swallow. And I drive by my ex's house at 2 a.m. and I bake sugar cookies full of sprinkles, pink, purple, green, teal, orange, white moons, purple and yellow stars. The jar is labeled Unicorn Love. And this time the hurricane has brought only rain, but it's miserable, a chained dog named King or Princess who only answers to bitch. And if kind words are fed to me, I swallow them and turn them to bile. And I pick at the hole in my sweater until it grows loud, like a cicada's constant song. Like the rock station on the car radio after I roll the window down. I startle the lone doe at my mailbox and envy her instinct to run. This final poem is titled Ode to My Grandmother's Death Rattle. I don't mistake you for a dirge, despite your pallid percussive beat. You're just pearls of spit pooling in the pitch hollow of her throat, pressing muscles that lost the memory of how to swallow. But when air pulls through your syruped marrow, you sing. I hear your viscous voodoo child voice, your shredded electric soul. You are a promised psalm, a last lullaby, a rush of gurgled milk, kisses on skinned knees, as much a rite of passage as the first time a toe is dipped in the ocean, and by that I mean you are sacred. Alive. Thank you.
In a story Ashleigh Ray wrote for Fiction Workshop, a young girl is told by her parents to stay inside after dark. It's for your safety, they assure her. But the girl, curious as ever and emboldened by turning 10, makes a plan to slip out of the house and test the dangers herself. Once her parents fall asleep, she tiptoes through the house, ties her shoes, slides her coat on over her pajamas, steels her nerves, and unlocks the front door. Before her is a wall of darkness. Her heart is pounding. She feels paralyzed. Somehow she gets up the nerve to set out into the unknown. She releases the doorknob and steps, expecting the solid ground to meet her toes. Instead, she finds only emptiness. She falls into the darkness, looking back at the receding light of the empty doorway. It's a scary moment, and one that most writers can relate to. We step into the unknown. We fall. We're as frightened as a 10-year-old meeting the dangers of the wide world for the first time. Sometimes we glance back longingly at the security of what we left behind. Other times we fall through the darkness and doubt with the conviction that we are traveling somewhere new, somewhere better. Ashleigh is a writer with the courage to take that leap, to lift her arms and expect to fly. She's been an absolute joy to work with these past 3 years, in class, on the staff of Saw Palm, and especially on her thesis. Born of Shadow and Bone is a smartly written fantasy novel about a young woman whose job is to quash outbreaks of demons. Ashleigh had not only to create a plot and characters, she had to construct an entire fantasy world. She worked tirelessly. She revised endlessly, listening carefully to advice, but always staying true to her vision. She had the courage to wander in the darkness and bang out pages of light, in prose so clear and accomplished that you quickly see what she sees, and you say, yes, I want to go on this journey with you. I want to see where this demon hunter ends up. I want to see where Ashleigh Ray ends up as a writer. I want to see what her pages light up in the darkness. Ashleigh, thank you for your smart, calm, good-natured presence and for sharing your talents with us these past 3 years. I'm sorry to see you leave the MFA program, but I know you'll accomplish amazing things.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for watching our virtual curtain call. It means a lot to share with my friends and family what I've been working so hard at for these last 3 years. But first, let me give thanks. Thank you to my family for never waning in support of my dreams. Thank you to my friends for being there for advice and random trips to Disney World. Thank you to my cohort. Never have I bonded so closely to such a great group of people. And thank you to the USF faculty, especially those of you who served on my committee. I cannot tell you how much it means to me that you read 100 pages of my fantasy daydreams. For my reading, I'm going to keep it short. I spent a lot of time in class with Rita working on perfecting the flash fiction short story. This is probably my favorite piece that I've written so far. This is Curfew. Ever since she was small, May was afraid of the dark. She wasn't sure what it was exactly that made her lower lip tremble as she watched the light fade from everything. It could have been the ominous way darkness clung to everything when the sun fell in the sky. It could have been the stories her parents told her of children getting swept up by monsters unseen. It was why there was a curfew, they would explain, to keep children from being lost. At the end of every day, May watched her parents close the blinds and lock the doors. They checked and double-checked the windows to make sure they were secure. Together, they walked May to her room, kissed her on her forehead, and reminded her to stay in bed. It's for your safety, they assured her together. May let their assurances and cautions keep her in bed, where she watched the darkness spread and linger until she fell asleep. But she was a curious child. May wanted to know why she had to stay in her bed after sundown, and why her parents took such care to lock down the house every night. Her parents answered her questions with stories of monsters, but May also remembered them telling her of a jolly man who climbed down their chimney once a year to deliver gifts to children who behaved, and that turned out not to be true at all. May learned early not to trust everything she was told. On her 10th birthday, May decided she was old enough to know the truth. After all, she'd earned double digits. She figured with age had to come some amount of wisdom and courage. And once she faced the darkness, she would no longer be afraid. After a day of celebrations and cake, May's parents sent her to bed with smiles and kisses to her temple. But once they fell asleep, May snuck out of bed and toward her window. She peered out between the slits in her blinds. The moon was visible, and she could just see the outlines of the other houses along her street. She put her ear to the sill, even going so far as to raise the blinds and place her face against the cool glass. There wasn't a sound beyond her own breathing. She was turning away from the glass when she saw something out of the corner of her eye, a shivering shape in the darkness. May blinked, pressed her face to the glass again and searched, but the shape was gone. Her eyes inspected every nook and cranny she could make out, but whatever she'd seen was gone. She rubbed her eyes with loose fists and chalked it up to fear. It was rising in her like vomit, rooted in her stomach and inching up her throat, but she couldn't stop now. May thought of how proud she'd be when she did the thing everyone else was afraid to do, and rose to her feet. On her tiptoes, May padded quietly down the stairs to the front door. That night, it seemed to loom much larger over her head than it ever had before. May reached for her tennis shoes that she left nearby and slowly placed them onto her feet, taking time to tie them tightly. Her hands shook as she finished knotting her laces. It's fine, she thought to herself. It's just the dark. It's not as scary as everyone thinks. Her coat, a pink puffy thing, hung on a coat rack. Gently, she pulled it free and put her arms through the right holes. She was wearing her favorite pair of pajamas, a matching light blue cotton shirt and pair of pants patterned with small Minnie Mouse silhouettes. The presence of her favorite cartoon character did little to quell her nervousness. May reached for the lock on the door, and it clicked softly. The house was still when May's fingers wrapped around the doorknob and turned it. She pulled, and the door opened easily. Before her was a wall of darkness. May looked down at the ground, and though she knew there was a brick patio just past the doorway, that it would be safe to step forward, she was frozen. The darkness was so vast, so encompassing, that she fell paralyzed before it. She reminded herself that she was 10, old enough to be brave and to finally know what it was her parents kept secret. With renewed confidence, May released her hand from the knob and stepped out onto the patio. But where she anticipated solid brick, there was nothing but air. Her foot fell forward into the black vacuum, and the rest of her fell along with it. Panicked, May turned around to reach for the doorknob, but her arms were too short. She tried to scream, but the sounds were swallowed by silence. As she fell, May watched the light of her empty doorway grow smaller and smaller still. Eventually, the light grew too small to see, and it too was swallowed. Thank you for listening.
Every time that Macey and I met to discuss her thesis this past year, she would tell me some new and wonderful detail about her story, like the New England Journal of Medicine case study about her mother, which Macey talks about in the prologue of her manuscript. In her thesis titled To See Her, a Memoir, Macey begins with her and her mother's unlikely survival of a rare and aggressive brain tumor, which leaves her mother blind and with short and long-term memory loss. From a psych ward haunted house, to a snake swimming beside her mother in the pool, to a newly discovered legal pad with her grandfather's handwritten medical notes, Macey explores what it means to be both daughter and caregiver, both keeper of memories and the memory itself. At USF, Macey has served as the vice president for the English Graduate Student Association, and she hosted and coordinated the 2018 Writers' Harvest and the 2018 and 19 6x6 reading series. She also has served as creative nonfiction editor and InDesign and layout editor for Sawpalm. Macey has presented her work at several conferences, including the Tampa Bay Area Writing Project's Youth Writing Conference and the Gulf Coast Association for Creative Writing Teachers. She's the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Honeybee Lit Mag, and she works as a content and freelance writer for V-Exchange and Follow Me Away. Macey's essays have been published in The Pinch, The Odyssey, and Teal Guide to London. Congratulations, Macey, on the successful defense of your thesis and on graduation.
I'd first like to thank you all for tuning in to our virtual curtain call. It saddens me that we cannot do this reading in person, but I completely understand why, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to still participate in some way. Before I begin reading from a portion of my thesis tonight, I would like to say a few words. To my family, thank you for supporting me, and not just throughout these past 3 years. Thank you for always encouraging my love for reading, for letting me stick my nose in a laptop or notebook to write, and for never losing patience over the fact that I've never shown you any of my work. I am forever blessed by your love and encouragement and the faith you have in my abilities, not just as a writer, but as a person. Thank you for being you, thank you for loving me, but most importantly, thank you for giving me some kick-ass material to write about. To my professors at USF, it has been such a privilege to share Cooper Hall with you over the past 3 years. I have learned so much from each of your classes, and these lessons are things I will not only carry with me for the rest of my writing career, but for the rest of my life. Your wisdom, advice, feedback, and support has helped me in more ways than I can say. Thank you. To my thesis committee, is there anything to say but wow? Thank you for believing in this project, for pushing for me to complete it. I would have not been able to get this far with this book without your generous feedback and support. I'm eternally grateful for every meeting, every margin note. Thank you for looking at multiple drafts and for always having my best interest in heart. It is because of you all that I now believe in this project, and for that I am forever indebted to you. To my cohort. There is so much I could say, but in doing so, I know I get emotional and I don't really want to cry on camera. So I'll start simple and I'll try to keep it short and sweet. You all have been my biggest rocks over the past 3 years. Through every up and down, not only in the program, but in life, I know you've had my back. While USF's MFA program taught me much about being a professional and being a writer, it was you all that taught me about what it means to create your own family. I'm so blessed to have your friendship, love, and support. I know this is not the end of our crazy cohort, and I wouldn't have it any other way. It has been a privilege to work, laugh, and spend time with you. I don't know where our futures will take us, but I know I'm going to be reading your amazing words in print one day. I love each and every one of you more than you could ever know. Thank you for being my MFA family. Okay, now that the thank yous are over and I've avoided getting too emotional, I'd like to read a snippet from my thesis. This comes from chapter 3 of my memoir, and essentially it's the chapter that starts to dig at what it was like to grow up as both a caregiver and a daughter for my mother. So this is chapter 3, entitled tentatively Routine. My mother was never really physically capable of being a mother. Between blindness and her short-term memory loss, it's hard for her to do the simplest of tasks. Shave her legs, make dinner, pour her own drink. So we created routines, daily and weekly schedules to follow to ensure things got done the way they were supposed to be done. In the evening, Mama showered first while I set up the blow dryer, laid out our towels and her cucumber melon lotion. Once she was done, I hopped in and used the rest of the water while Mama dried her hair, lathered her legs, and brushed her teeth. We slid by one another in our Jack and Jill bathroom, our reflections distorted by steam on mirrors, and then we'd race, set a timer and see who could get changed into our PJs the fastest. I watched Mama from my side of the bathroom as she carefully placed a hand on the counter to balance herself as she slid her pajama bottoms on one leg at a time. I always paced myself seconds behind her, letting her win, claiming my hair got tangled in my tank top or she was just too fast for me, even though I would pause and perch myself on the edge of the counter, waiting for her to finish getting ready for bed. One evening, we broke routine. I brushed her still wet hair, taking a fine-tooth comb and pulling it through her dark waves. I was careful not to nick her scalp or pull too hard where her hair had thinned from the scar tissue of her 3 brain surgeries. I paused and looked at the way her skull was raised. I traced my fingers over the bone that had been cut, pausing at the bumps, looking through the few strands of hair at the 4 screws holding the once removed frontal bone intact. The screws were hazy and gray and small, but felt big and dark against her light skin. Sticking out between bumps of bone and scar tissue, the screws were noticeable. I knew this, or I felt this, but I also knew the screws held her together, and while I wondered if they hurt, if Mama could feel them digging into her skull, the heads piercing the underside of her skin, I didn't want to bring attention to them. Is everything okay, Mama asked? I tapped my fingers against her head. Yes, Mama. What were you doing? I never noticed the screws up here before, I said quietly. Did she know about them? Mama's eyes flicked upward. In the mirror, I could see the topaz color of her irises, the left one slightly lazy, her gaze following the sound of my voice. Are they noticeable? She asked. No, I said, and I parted her hair to the side, covering the scars and screws with a patch of thick, wavy hair. You look beautiful, I said, as I pressed a quick kiss to her head. Mama smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Can I dry your hair? Mama asked one evening. I stepped out of the shower. We hadn't even begun a race to get changed, and even though I never dried my curls because I knew they would expand and frizz with heat, I told her yes. I was 12 and we had gotten in the habit of breaking routines lately. Mama kept one hand on my left shoulder to balance herself. I stood in front of her and watched our reflections move in the mirror above our sinks as it began to fog. With a green towel wrapped around me, I crossed my arms over my chest and waited as Mama tilted the hairdryer back and forth, shaking it. The heat stung my neck, my right shoulder. At 5'3", Mama was at least 2 inches shorter than me, so she dried my skin and not my hair. I tried to shift to the right, to bend my knees so the blast of hot air hit my curls. Mama straightened me out. Stop squirming, she said with a laugh. I knew she thought I was still 6 years old, stout and chunky, with short hair that clung to my ears and jaw and ringlets. She didn't know that I was older now, taller, but I refused to correct her, to remind her how quickly I was growing up, or how things were changing in a way she couldn't quite remember. I didn't want to draw attention to the fact that she couldn't see me changing or growing up. I was scared it would make her sad. And so I stood there and tightened my arms across my chest. I bit my lip and stared at the sink, refusing to look up and see us in the mirror. If she couldn't see us, I didn't want to either. There, Mama said finally. All done. She handed me the blow dryer and I shut it off, pulling the cord of the wall socket and wrapping it around the neck of the dryer before stashing it under the sink. Thanks, Mama, I said. I pressed a kiss to her forehead. When she was gone, I turned toward the mirror. Wisps of dry curls framed my face, but my hair was still dark with water above my neck at the back of my scalp. I ran my fingers through the curls and winced. I rotated my body toward the mirror and saw my right shoulder. The skin was neon, pink and dashed with splotches of red. A small blister formed near a collection of freckles. One freckle had even turned white. I closed my eyes and sighed, reaching for my pajama shirt and throwing it on before flicking off the light and going to bed. As I lay between the cool sheets, I clenched my eyelids tighter, trying to ignore how my skin ached and burned with the slightest of movements. The next time she asked me to dry my hair, I told her no. We had routines to stick to. Thank you.
What can I say about Pat Templeton? He's the spiffiest dresser to ever come through the MFA program. He can rock a three-piece suit and a rainbow bow tie as well as he can a Mr. Rogers t-shirt. He's also the friendliest. He's the boulevardier of Cooper Hall, though never in a bougie way. He's always polite, always respectful, always a friendly face you can count on, even when he has his own struggles to overcome. He'll wave to you from 20 offices down the hall. He does charity work on the side. He does color commentary for hockey games. He'll pun you till you groan, but somehow leave you wanting more. He kills it with the puns. He's a world traveler who took half his cohort on a cross-country journey with him. Every fall, I look forward to the recap of his far-flung summer travels. When someone needs help, personally or professionally, Pat is always there. When someone asks for a volunteer to burst into a novel writing class in a robe and hood and play a Dementor, Pat writes back in all caps, "I want to do this," because Pat will do just about anything for anyone, anytime he's needed. All this, and I don't know how Pat has time to write, but he finds a way, sometimes with the help of a deadline or two. And he's a hell of a writer. His novel, Both, subtitled Everything Either Looks Crazy from the Inside or Crazy from the Outside, Family Looks the Same Either Way, began as a serious family drama about a divorced dad trying to renew his relationships with his children during a summer on the Outer Banks. Then a funny thing happened in the drafting process: mini golf. Pat had tried to suppress his good-natured weirdness and write a serious novel, but he couldn't resist writing a scene about a competition at an Everest-themed mini-golf course with his protagonist squaring off against an Icelandic champion putt-putt family. I said, "Pat, the family drama is good, but this mini-golf stuff is you, and we need more of you." But of course, Pat is more than just wackiness and puns. Pat is the full range of Pat. He kept revising. He found that he could use his natural talents at humor, not only to make people laugh, but to address serious emotional issues. He could make us care about the struggling father and the father's awkwardly expressed love for his children, even as he called our attention to a plaster cast of Edmund Hillary warning patrons of the dangers of mini golf. And now Both is on its way to a weird and funny and moving novel, and Pat is on his way to many successes in writing and beyond, starting with another master's program, this time a Master's of Public Administration from the University of Southern California. Pat, I wish you the best in your journeys through the academic world and the wide world beyond. We'll miss you around Cooper Hall, but I know you'll bring kindness and joy and an endless supply of puns wherever you go.
Howdy folks. So since I'm going last, I figured I'd try to take up as little time as possible. If I try to do the unabridged version of thank yous for my time here in Florida, I'd probably end up being more like Leslie Knope in terms of the 73-page first draft territory. So I'll try to just go ahead and summarize a bit. Thank you to all the faculty members who help all things academic and professional, especially my wonderful committee, John, Rita, and Jared. Also, this is Stubbs, who wanted to help me out with the video. Thank you, the EXA and GAU peeps who help with putting on events, feeding people, and just generally trying to do good things for people across the campus and in the department. Thank you to the folks from Trinity Cafe and Suncoast Kids Place who gave me so much energy, encouragement, and love. Thank you for the friends, family, and found family that made living in Tampa so great the past 3 years. And of course, thank you to my cohort, the MF family. Being crazy isn't easy, but when you're with a bunch of other people who are crazy in the same way, it's wonderful. It makes you feel seen, valued, heard, and understood. And that's one of the greatest gifts that life can give you. I'll be forever grateful for being given that feeling and so much more by y'all. Anyway, I thought I'd have a little fun and write something for this little video. So some pieces of wisdom from the last 3 years, which I'm gonna go ahead and just call 23 things I learned during my MFA. Number 1, depending on the semester and the class, your students will either think you are 22 or 40. Him that has the power to make room reservations is him that gets the many friendly emails. You okay, Barbara? Number 3, workshops will make you will make you far more gentle in all of life's criticisms, as in, I thought this dinner had great detail, but I was left wanting to know more about if you had any seasoning at all in it. Number 4, sleeping on a hardwood floor is just about equally uncomfortable on the floor itself as on a pool floaty on that same floor. But road trips are at least more fun with loved ones to share them with. Number 5, there is a surprising amount of fiction in a lot of nonfiction, and a surprising amount of nonfiction in a lot of fiction. Number 6, no one decides to be tired willingly. Always be ready with a good hug and at least one open ear. Number 7, people who live in a place where it rains a lot have a surprisingly difficult time driving in the rain. Number 8, disc golf doesn't get enough credit for the skill and fortitude it takes to master, especially when played in a hilly forest nightmarescape. Number 9, a micro HDMI cable and a mini HDMI cable are not the same thing, and if you prepare as if they are, you may end up doing a radio broadcast of a hockey game instead of a video broadcast. Number 10, at any job or university, you should never forget the question, what is the parking situation like here? There's a cat trying to be involved in the video too, but dogs only this time. Number 11, if you work at a kids camp where the kids keep you up late into the night, the next morning will earn you the nickname Raccoon Eyes. Number 12, BYOC equals bring your own chair. Parties work well when your apartment has no chairs and no couch, and this is a good system for trying to make sure everybody has somewhere to sit. Number 13, there are few better feelings in life than for a student to tell you that you've made a difference in their lives. Number 14, if you need a Dementor outfit, you can save money by simply using a Star Wars shopping bag on the head, a black jacket on the back, and clean black socks on the hands. Your acting will make up for the limited costuming. Number 15, a dog's bark is like a fire alarm, loud, consistent, and once it's going, it's hard to remember how to stop it. Number 16, poetry is not prose with line breaks. Number 17, if you keep a bar of soap out on your desk, you will have a conversation starter for every person who enters the office. They will start the conversation. Number 18, if the buffet includes mini churros and there are fewer than 50 of them remaining, I will not leave any of those for the people after me. Number 19, sometimes when you think you're at the end of something, you're at the beginning of something else. Number 20, keep the music loud and make interesting choices. Number 21, the place in which I will fit will not exist until I make it. James Baldwin. Number 22, just because it's hard doesn't mean it's impossible. And number 23, just because it's scary doesn't mean you're not being brave.